Good morning. We are now going to look at chapter 9, which is all about emotions. This is another chapter that I feel could practically be an entire course. So let's get cracking. Okay. So before we jump into the chapter itself about emotions, I wanted to talk about a concept they mention in the introduction to this chapter called emotional intelligence. I was just reading that there's a little bit of while this was widely accepted maybe 20 years ago when this came out, there's some evidence that it's not as straightforward as it seems. I have not read that research yet, so once I do, I will update you. But so to the left is a picture of the cast from the TV show. Yep, just went blank on it. The Big Bang Theory. And the man roughly in the middle with the Flash t-shirt, Sheldon, is someone who has he doesn't have strong emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage our own emotions and to be sensitive to others' feelings. That's where Sheldon has problems with it. Okay. So one of the big name in emotional intelligence is Daniel Goleman. Oh, he's written a crap load of books. And he's come up with his belief that success in life depends more on our EQ, our emotional intelligence quota, than on our IQ. Like, we can be super intelligent, but if we lack the ability to understand how we're feeling and how other people are feeling, we're not going to go as far as we could. So I want you to watch the video on emotional intelligence. It's 15, 16 minutes. It's pretty old. It's from when his ideas first came out, but I think it'll help you understand the concept a little bit more. And I hope that as we go through this chapter, you're going to get a better idea of how you understand your own emotions and how you manage your own emotions. So, section 1 is very basic. It's the idea of what are emotions. And we want to look at how we as human beings experience emotions and how we express them. And then I want you to personalize this to think about yourself. So we're going to look at 4 different components of emotions. And the first one we're going to look at is the physiological changes. We keep coming across this word physiology. It's what's happening in the body. So there's this interesting picture on the right-hand side where social scientists said to people, when you're feeling angry, where do you feel it? At first I thought they had actually done some kind of heat mapping, but not. Okay, so what they're saying, anger is like from the head down to the hands. Happiness is all over. Sadness seems to be, in the head and in the heart, more or less. Okay, so what I want to emphasize here is they're talking about strong emotions. Disgust is a pretty strong emotion, and anger is a strong emotion, as opposed to being a little annoyed. Okay, but when we are in the grip of a strong emotion, our heartbeat increases, our blood pressure goes up, the body produces a lot of adrenaline, our blood sugar rises, our digestion slows. And it doesn't matter necessarily if it's anger or fear or happiness that we are feeling. It's strong, strong emotions. Okay, so I like in the text it says there's a connection between emotions and physical health. So, when you're feeling completely emotionally overwhelmed, you're probably exhausted and hungry. And then the people who've discovered exercise understand that when they've exercised, when their body is healthy, and releasing endorphins, it helps them manage emotions a little bit more. Okay, so beyond the physiological changes, which we can't see, I mean, I'm looking at you, I don't know that your heartbeat is up or your blood pressure is up or your digestion has slowed. What I maybe can see looking at you are nonverbal behaviors. So these are changes either in your appearance, your blushing, or your behavior. You're wringing your hands. So when my son was 2 and a bit and my daughter was a newborn, we were all outside and I said to my husband, I'm going in to take a bath. Keep an eye on Alexander. And he heard, I'm going inside to take a bath. I'm taking Alexander. And so when I was done with my bath, I came out and I said, where is he? And my husband said, he's inside with you. In any case, he had wandered away. I stood in the front yard wringing my hands. I didn't think people actually did that. But that was an observable change to show my emotional state. Okay. When we are looking at people, think about chapter 7 when we talked about nonverbals, and also chapter 5 when we talked about perception. It's easy to tell by the nonverbals that someone is feeling a strong emotion, but we're not always good at knowing what exactly that emotion is. So, what do? You think that someone is really angry with you, so you react. Well, how about saying, wow, I noticed that you're flushed and I don't know, your mouth is set. Are you angry with me? You just do a perception check. Okay. So we usually think that we react a certain way. We exhibit certain nonverbal behaviors because that is our reaction to an emotional state, but could be the opposite is true, that our nonverbals can cause emotions. If you remember from chapter 7, Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, where she talked about power posing. And if you stand in a confident position, that's your nonverbal behavior, it can cause you to feel more confident. And she doesn't go into a lot of details about this, but remember she talks about when people are waiting for interviews and they're hunched over looking at their phone, that hunching over and looking down can actually make you feel more down. Okay. So, frequently, there is a connection between your nonverbal reactions and verbalizing your emotions, like how your body is acting and what you say. And they say that the textbook talks about a study that shows that when participants generated words associated with pride and disappointment, they stood taller. And when they were talking about pride, and they slumped when they were talking about the disappointment. So kind of nonverbal behaviors in the middle, right? Our nonverbal behavior can cause emotions, and our verbalizing of emotions can cause nonverbal reactions, which can cause emotions. I know it's very interconnected. Okay. To me, I think this one is maybe the most interesting, that it's when we get to the cognitive interpretations. All right, we're back to chapter 5. We're thinking about perception. The mind impacts how we feel. So remember back when we talked about physiological changes. How our body experiences emotions are very similar. So how we actually experience the emotions comes from the label that we put on it. Okay, well, let's think about that. Philip Zimbardo has this great story that's related in the textbook about being in the classroom, and he noticed that he's sweating, and he looks around the room and he sees that people are slumped, their heads down, a couple people are leaving, and he says, "Oh my God, I'm sweating. I must be nervous." And then all of a sudden, the student, I'm nervous. I'm boring my students. I'm a terrible teacher. I should quit. And then a student says, "It's really hot in here." Well, he wasn't feeling nervous necessarily until he told himself that he was feeling nervous. Okay? So the words we pick to describe the emotions can have a very strong impact on these emotions. And I forgot to write this down, but there is a video that very short, it's about 3 minutes, that I would like you to watch. It's called How to Turn Anxiety into Excitement. They're talking, it's more about in the context of public speaking. If you have an anxiety disorder, it's a little bit different. But basically, there's this nice little graphic that shows you can go from anxiety to excitement. They also talk about anxiety to calm. It might not always be a great idea. Okay. And then because we have the ability to label our emotions, it's very important to think about this idea of reappraisal, which is rethinking the meaning of the events to alter their emotional impact. So we frequently do this when a lot of time has passed. Here's my story. I was in high school. I was walking home from school. I passed a couple, and the young man whistled at me. And I thought, all right, I'm looking pretty good today. And when I got home, I realized that I had tucked the bottom of my dress into the top of my pantyhose. So I walked down that whole street showing everyone my backside. And I was mortified, horribly, horribly embarrassed. Told my mother we had to move because I couldn't go back to school. It was at that point the most embarrassing thing that had ever happened to me. Now that many years have passed, I think it's about the funniest thing that happened. So I've been able to reappraise this. Okay, so obviously, 40 years passes, you can reappraise. It's a great skill to develop, to be able to reappraise, if not exactly in the moment, at least closer to the time of this emotionally charged event. If you can learn to do this, you can improve your relationships with people who are important to you. And we will talk more about it later in this chapter when we talk about the work of Albert Ellis and how to dispute irrational beliefs. Okay, so the last part in this section is verbal expressions. Okay. Whereas we don't always use words to express emotions. Sometimes we believe that our nonverbals are strong enough and people will know how we feel just by the way we're acting. But it's a good idea to actually use words frequently. And when we put emotions into words or we express emotions, it's called affect labeling. And this can be helpful to help you manage them. Okay. You have to be careful not to either overstate or understate how you're feeling. And so there's this nice chart that goes right, if we go down the middle, you're angry. Well, what if you're just a little bit angry? Well, you could say you're annoyed. What if you're really, really angry? You'd say furious. So it's important to start developing a language of emotions so you don't always just go with the angry, sad, happy, afraid, loving. Okay. There are many people, I have been one of them, who aren't able to talk about emotions constructively. It's definitely something that I'm working on. I have the theory. I'm not always able to put it into practice. Okay. And I would argue you want to avoid using the words like a little or very. And instead of saying, I'm a little afraid, how about say I'm anxious? Or instead of saying I was super afraid, say I was terrified. It's a good thing for you to be able to do. Okay. So, and as I said, avoid always going overboard where, like, what do they say? Everything is fantastic. You're always furious or ecstatic or adoring. Use the appropriate level or appropriate intensity of emotion for the emotion that you're feeling. All right. So Can you tell me at this point what are the four, I guess I'd call them components of emotions? How do experiences human emotions? How about how do humans experience emotions? And then think about, as human beings, how do we express emotions? And then personalize it. How do you express emotions? Do you feel that you're doing so effectively? And if so, can you share an example? And if not, do you have an idea of what you could do to express your emotions a little more effectively? All right, that is section 1.